It's been 10 days since the horrific attack against Israel. Hamas is still firing rockets into southern Israel, and people are still scrambling for bomb shelters.
Well, yesterday, ambassadors from several nations experienced firsthand what Israelis have suffered for years. CBN's Chris Mitchell reports from the town of Sderot near the Gaza border.
Former Israeli ambassador to the UN and Knesset member Danny Danon brought several ambassadors to the border town of Sderot on a fact-finding tour.
Before the deputy mayor, in case we have sirens, if you look back, you have the green door over there. You all see the green door?
60 seconds later,
Terrorists. No panic, no panic.
Let's go. So now you guys know that you know what to do. You know how it sounds like.
People of Sderot have to experience that.
We go through this a million times a day. We go through this sometimes where there's nowhere to go, so we have to go flat on our stomach. I think there's nothing like feeling it in order to be able to explain it to the world. Imagine doing this with a 4-year-old.
Right now, I feel how the people of Sderot feel all the time. I think we now really experienced in our own eyes what people, children, families from Sderot have to go through, especially these days.
It's over. Game over. We can't continue like this. We forgive them. We try to help them. It doesn't work. They are terrorists. They want to kill us.
Why did you bring the ambassadors down here today?
I think it's very important the ambassadors came here and saw what really happened here, the atrocities, to speak with the residents, to hear the horrible stories about the massacre that took place here a week ago. I'm sure they will report back home, because when the pressure will come against us, we want them to speak up.
Meanwhile, Israel's new emergency government stood in silence for those murdered and soldiers who fell in battle.
We work around the clock, teamwork, with a united front. The unity within us conveys a clear message to the people, the enemy, and the world.
Defense Minister Yoav Gallant vowed a mighty and deadly war.
We will reach all the terrorist infrastructures. We will reach all the tunnels. We will reach all Hamas operatives, and until we eliminate them, we will not complete the mission. And it will be a war that will change the situation forever.
Israel is dropping tens of thousands of leaflets to warn Gazans to evacuate to the south and to the sea to get out of the line of fire. But Hamas is trying to stop them. Tension along the Lebanese border increased Sunday, with Hezbollah and Israel trading fire. Israel is amassing tanks and troops, with many concerned about a two-front war. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign minister told the UN that if the military action in Gaza continues, it will be forced to intervene. The U.S. has dispatched 2 carrier groups to the region to deter a widening war. Speaking on CBS 60 Minutes, President Biden defended Israel's war on Hamas in Gaza.
Now look, there's a fundamental difference. Israel is going after a group of people who have engaged in barbarism that is as consequential as the Holocaust. And so I think Israel has to respond. They have to go after Hamas.
He also had a one-word warning for Iran and Hezbollah if they're considering getting involved.
Don't.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Sderot, Israel.
Well, CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell joins us now. And so, Chris, you were down there and you found out exactly why they call it Rocket Town. What was it like with the other ambassadors?
Well, Gordon, it's terrifying. You know, when you hear that sound and, you know, you can hear the explosion on the video there, but when you're hearing it live, it's deafening. So this is what people in Sderot and southern communities have been going through for maybe 20 years or so. And there you have about 7 seconds. Actually, we weren't able to get to the bomb shelter before the Iron Dome hit that rocket. So You know, that could have landed anywhere where we were. So that's what they have to do. You know, and then, Gordon, we followed the ambassadors and Danny Danon. We went to a place called Ofakim. That was a place where Hamas terrorists came into that place. There were about 50 people killed there. And to give you some context about what Ofakim is like, you know, I think since the beginning of the town back in the 1950s, maybe about 50 people in that time since 2023 have been killed or murdered. There were 50 people killed within 5 hours there. And we went into a home where a husband and wife were hostage for 20 hours. Thankfully, that ended in a good way. They were rescued. The 5 terrorists that held them captive were killed. But for firsthand, those ambassadors, that was to experience it firsthand, like that woman said in our report, there's really nothing like that.
Ask, how does Hamas still have the capacity to fire the rockets? I mean, over the weekend, we heard that they had rockets that actually made it all the way up to Haifa. Are they that sophisticated in hiding these things that it's secret from the Israeli military?
It seems they are, Gordon. I think that's the same question we've asked. I mean, Israel has been pounding many of these sites for days, and they had been in previous operations, and you wonder, how can they still fire these rockets? So it's a good question, and I think that's what the whole idea behind this possible ground invasion is going to be, once and for all, eliminate the threat of these attacks. You could hear the anger of the deputy mayor from Sderot. This is it. We don't want it anymore. And I also talked to a kind of a paratrooper that's actually going into secret operations in the Gaza border area, and they said they're committed. This is not gonna. There's going to be a change in the situation down on the south. They're not going to permit or allow this to happen anymore, as it has been going on for the past 20 years or more.
Well, the reports that surfaced over the weekend is that the very terrorists who went into these villages, these towns, to massacre them had actually been employed. That the Israelis had reached out and said, we want to help you, we want to give you employment. And the very people that they tried to help were the very people that killed them.
That's exactly right, Gordon. We were in the town of Be'eri, the kibbutz, where more than 100 people were massacred, slaughtered, murdered. We were there on Saturday. The commander there told us that they knew exactly where to go. And when the terrorists came in, the people that followed them were robbers. They knew exactly where to go in each of these houses. They knew where the jewelry was, where the money was. And so these were people that had come in to work in these kibbutzes. And what happened is that they were betrayed by them, not only by the terrorists who came to slaughter them, but the people who followed the terrorists to rob them.
Well, the Biden administration, the United States, is standing strong with Israel. They're sending a second carrier group to the region. At the same time, Iran is warning Israel that if there's a ground invasion of Gaza, that they are going to intervene. What do you think is going to happen? Are we going to get into a larger regional conflict? Is America going to find itself fairly soon in some kind of military conflict with Iran?
It seems like that's a possible scenario right now, Gordon, especially on the northern front. Whether or not President Biden's word, don't do it, for Iran and Hezbollah is going to be strong enough to prevent Hezbollah and or Iran from getting into the conflict. The U.S. seems like it would get involved directly if Hezbollah joins the fray. And with the last several days of all the things going on the northern border, it's getting very hot and very tense. And that's what everyone's looking at, the possibility of a second front up there on the northern border.
Gaza is being called the largest prison in the world, and one of the borders of that prison, if you will, if you take that analogy, is Egypt. Why does Egypt have a closed border with Gaza?
Well, they don't want the Palestinians to come in, and that's sort of the open secret over here, Gordon. They don't want to govern Gaza. And that's one of the ways why Israel has been reluctant to go into Gaza, because they don't want to govern it either. And right now it's been, a tyrannical regime of Hamas since 2007. So Egypt doesn't want this problem. Israel doesn't want this problem. Militarily, it seems that Israel can take over the Gaza and destroy the Hamas infrastructure. The question is, what's going to happen the day after?
Well, Egypt has been trying for years. I mean, the Sinai was radicalized. There were missile strikes against civilian airliners coming out of that region. They fired missiles. It's unbelievable that they would try to take down a civilian airplane, but that's what they did. And the other part of it is Hamas is an outreach of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is responsible for so much violence in Egypt. They've now been outlawed. Are we in the West sort of blind to this? That when Hamas has their Hamas covenant and they say, we want to wipe out all Jews across the planet, it's not just we want to take Israel and create some kind of peaceful society. They've been talking genocide for decades.
I think that's something the people in the West need to take at face value. They need to realize that Hamas is telling them what they plan to do in their charter. Iran's doing the same thing. It's an apocalyptic ideology and religious understanding, and they mean what they say. That's why they're arming themselves. That's why they're attacking Israel. And I think people, that's exactly what they mean. And, you know, people in the West really need to take them at the word. I just add, Gordon, you know, the ambassadors there saw firsthand. Ambassador Danone said that right now the pressure is going to be on Israel. People are going to say this never happened. They're exaggerating. The pictures are fake. That's why those ambassadors there were there to tell the world what actually happened. And I think that's part of the battle that Israel's in right now, the battle over information and the battle over truth.
Well, let's show you some pictures that aren't fake. Chris, I don't know if you can watch along, but we've got some B-roll of the celebrations on the West Bank with a little girl holding up an automatic weapon and a pistol. And it just shows how much the ideology is transferred generationally. They are absolutely celebrating. This is right after the attacks on Saturday. And for this kind of celebration to be happening, and you just kind of go, why are you celebrating a massacre? But let's take it forward to the protests in London, and that was just this past weekend. So here you have London, a bastion of democracy and liberty, and you have this kind of huge demonstration. I'm having trouble making sense of it. And then the rallying cry right now, Hamas is Palestine. Palestinians are Hamas. Seems to be taking over. Do you think they really understand that they're lining up with an ideology that says we need to wipe out all the Jews?
Actually, Gordon, I think many of them do, and I think that's part of the battlefront going on. I mean, Israeli troops are going on Gaza. They're going up to the northern border, but the other battlefield and the other battle lines are in London or the West Bank, and also on social media. And this is the battle. There are many people that are going to support Hamas during this time. And there's divisions happening, it seems, right now. For those who are going to stand with Israel, those are going to stand against Israel, stand with groups like Hamas that want to slaughter the Jews in the worst atrocity since the Holocaust.
Last question. Do you think the pay for slay is going to come into being? Is the Palestinian Authority going to pay the families of the terrorists who invaded last Saturday? Are they going to pay them under that program?
Well, it's part of the Palestinian Authority law. I checked with Itamar Marcus. He's the head of the Palestinian Media Watch. They monitor this all the time. And they say because of the 1,500 martyrs of the Hamas terrorists that were killed, that adds up to about $3 million a month that would be paid to their families. That's in addition to the nearly $30 million every month that are paid to the martyrs, those terrorists who either killed or maimed Israelis. So whether or not the world is going to have an outcry, and particularly the European Union and nations like Norway, which is probably the biggest donor, remains to be seen. But this is exactly what Palestinian Authority law says will happen to Hamas terrorists.
Well, let's hope that we stop it. I think there needs to be an outcry around the world that we need to stop funding the Palestinian Authority. If they're going to take the funds and pay for terrorism, we need to completely shut it down. Well, Chris, thanks for joining with us. Thanks for the insight in this horrible time right now in Israel. I encourage you to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, but I also encourage you to take action. Many in the United States don't see how we can do this, but when you look at what happened at Times Square, when you look at what students at universities across this country are doing, when you look at, we have 3 elected members of Congress who say they support Hamas. We need to call them out on it. We need to say, do you really want to exterminate the Jews? Because when you say you're supporting Hamas, that's exactly what you mean. Well, this weekend, CBN News gained access to one of the Israeli communities targeted in the initial attacks from Gaza. CBN's Chuck Holton went to see firsthand the destruction of this once peaceful farming community.
Children's toys lie scattered in the midst of shell casings and burned out cars. The smell of death lingers in the air, a pungent reminder of the hellish attack just over a week ago. Colonel Golan Vash gave a tour of the village, describing what he found when his team first arrived, only hours after the area had been retaken from the terrorists.
We found a family outside, exactly where you're standing right now. But it was only the beginning of what we saw inside. In this corner of this living room, we find a concentration of 8 babies burned among 15 other people.
They came in here and slaughtered about 10% of the residents of this kibbutz. These are children, old people, and you can just see the incredible destruction that was wrought here. And the last terrorist was cleared out of this kibbutz a week after the initial attack. So their plan was to use it as a bargaining chip and to take everyone hostage here. Instead, they got an incredible battle as soldiers from the IDF came in and killed all of the terrorists.
I think that some of the terrorists who come hiding in the houses, for example here, wait silently in a high readiness for 12 hours or 16 hours, and then they get up. So every time that we saw that we clean the area and everything was silent, suddenly another 12 or another 20 got out. Yeah.
When the village was finally cleared, rescuers turned to recovery, and what they found will stay with them for the rest of their lives.
I found a mother lying, protecting her baby, and she was shot in the back, and the baby was beheaded.
You've been all over the world. You respond to rescues and crises. Describe how this compares to what you've seen around the world.
Nothing compared to that. If we needed anything to convince us, we cannot use the same democratic tools that the world use. It's not the human rights that you in your mind think of. Right now, there is no place for feeling. We are professionals. We need to achieve our goals, and our goal is to ensure that the Hamas organization is no longer exist.
This is what we're talking about here. You see these pictures of people with their babies, their children, that just wanted to live a peaceful life. And on the 7th of October, that peace was shattered. And now their home looks like this.
All this region, we must clear from this kind of threat if we want to provide our citizens the security, the protection that we could not give them last Saturday.
The battle to retake Be'eri may be over, but the war is just beginning. And as these IDF troops marshal their forces within sight of the massacre, every one of them knows exactly what they're fighting for. From southern Israel, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
These are disturbing images, but don't turn away. Don't look away from the horror of what occurred and is still occurring. The rockets are still falling in Israel. We can't turn away from this. Centuries ago, there was a Canaanite religion that offered up babies into the fire. And when you see babies burned to death, when you see babies beheaded, call it for what it is. We are looking at the face of evil. Now, the same perpetrators, the same people that did that burned children, were shouting, God is great. That's what Allahu Akbar means. That is no great God. We are looking at pure evil, and it needs to stop. Future generations will look at us and say, what did you do? When you were faced with that kind of evil, you had vowed never again. What did you do to stop it? I want to be able to answer them to say, we stood in our generation, and we stood for truth, we stood for life. We come against any culture of death, because that is what this is. We want you to know the truth behind the Jewish and Arab claims to the land of Israel. So we put together a DVD that gives the historical background to the news that you're seeing today. It's called Whose Land Is It? It has answers to questions of whether or not Gaza and the West Bank are occupied territory, while the Palestinian refugee crisis still remains a problem here more than 70 years after 1948. You can get a DVD copy or streaming instant access for Whose Land Is It? And it's for a gift of any dollar amount. All you have to do is go to cbn.com/whoseland or call us 1-800-700-7000.